All right, and we are live. Again, thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Paul Novak. I'm the founder and CEO here at Iris Reading, and we wanted to do this kind of special set of webinars for the weekend of Black Friday. I know a lot of people are out shopping and things like that, but why not learn something? Maybe something new. I know some of you have maybe taken one of our courses in the past. I see people here in the chat. Let us know where you're from. I see Canada, Toronto, someone from the UK, Orange County, California, Chicago, my hometown, and I'm joining from Miami. So let's get right into it. This is going to be like a speed reading workshop, but also I want to invite you to ask questions. You can shoot me an email later. We'll try to tie in this content. I want to make the most of your time as we're going along here. So our focus here at Iris Reading is really three areas: speed, you want to read faster; comprehension, we got to understand that material; and retention, we want to remember. Tomorrow we're going to be doing a webinar on memory. So if you feel like you read things and often forget, that is a useful webinar to take part in. And also, let's think about when was the last time you learned how to read? I mean, for most people, unless they've taken a course like this, the last time they've learned how to read was the first time they learned how to read. And that's almost a little odd if you think about it, because it's not like that with mathematics, right? It's not like that with history, anything in the sciences. That knowledge, it builds up over time. You're learning year by year. But reading, which underlies much of the education that we go through, reading is one of those things that's taught kind of once in our life. So that's unfortunate. So there's some old habits we got to change from when we first learned. By the way, I do see a question from Larry in the chat. Will you be sending out the slide deck? If you want me to shoot you the slide deck, shoot me an email, and just email me at, I'm going to type it in the chat, and I'll reply to everyone here, paul@irisreading.com, and I'll shoot you the slide deck. That'll also just be a nice little reminder for me to send it. We kind of changed up and customized these slides a little bit for the shorter session. We do sessions of all types. We've done training programs that are like half a day, 4 hours at a company, to 90-minute sessions, 1 hour, all over the place. So this is meant to be a quick overview, kind of like a crash course. Some of these old habits that we pick up that we got to change are the habit of going word by word and reading groups of words instead. If you think about it, you already do that kind of when you're driving in a car. You'll see an exit sign on the highway that says New York City, maybe, and you just see those words, New York City, not one by one, but in one chunk. Now, if the words New York City were buried in the middle of some paragraph on a page, then most people would kind of go with their eyes, New York City, very quickly, but that's that habit of fixation. It's going word by word. We learn it when we're little. Most people continue doing this for their lifetime, but you could be a little more efficient if you learn to read groups of words. Also, there's the habit of regression. That is something we've all done, right? I mean, this is a fancy term. I know it means different things in different contexts like mathematics, but when it comes to reading, this is just a fancy term for I'm rereading the text. I read it once. You ever read the same stupid sentence like 7 or 8 times and you're like, why is this not making sense? By the way, in this series, we're doing a webinar on Monday on the topic of focus. So that might be one you might be interested in if you feel like you're rereading a lot. We got to sharpen our focus. And then there's another old habit, and this is one is harder to change. It's the habit of subvocalization. That's that voice you hear in your head while you're reading. Sometimes I like to ask people, hey, have you noticed when you're reading, you hear voices in your head? And they start thinking about it, and they're like, it doesn't mean you're crazy. If that's happening to you, it's normal, okay? They call that subvocalization. That's how we learn to read. First read out loud, then start reading in your head. I used to hate reading out loud because Polish is my first language. Both of my parents are immigrants from Poland. I grew up speaking only Polish until I was like 5 or 6. So I used to hate reading out loud because I was always messing up on words. And actually, I remember struggling with reading as a kid originally. So eventually, you don't have to read out loud. Eventually, your teacher says, do this instead. Say the words in your head. And that's what they call it, subvocalization. So you're hearing your voice. The problem here is, do I have to say the word to understand what it means? The answer is not necessarily. I'll give you an example of when you don't subvocalize. When you're driving and you see a stop sign, you don't say stop, right? You see it and you got it, right? You've seen that word many times. I know the shape and the color of the sign also indicate, what that means, but for the most part, you see words and you can, but the funny thing is if the word stop were in the middle of some, paragraph, most people would say those words out of habit. So these habits got to change. Now, first thing we got to do if we're going to start improving our speed is we got to get a measurement of where are we at right now? What is my current reading speed? And of course, the speed fluctuates, right? It depends on what exactly are you reading at this moment in this time, right? Because if I'm reading and I only had 2 hours of sleep last night, I'm probably not going to read as fast as if I had a full night of sleep and I'm super focused. A lot of other things can play a part, right? Uh, Maybe caffeine intake. Too much could be bad, and maybe if caffeine gives you a nice little jump in energy and focus, that could help. But all sorts of things play a part. So first, let's measure our reading speed. I've got a document that I'm going to have on the next slide. You see it right here, okay? And what we're going to do is I'm going to have you read for just a minute. Now, since I'm going to have this popping up on the screen, I want you to enlarge the window. So maximize your window. I know some of you might be on smaller screens, so maybe this is not super clear to read. Try your best. The reality is if that's not clear to read, you can take a book that's lying around or go to your favorite news site, and we're just going to read for 1 minute. I'm going to time you using the timer on my phone. And it's only going to be a minute to test real quickly, what is my current reading speed, okay? Now also, very important that you read normally here. Don't try to purposely go faster. Don't purposely go slower. Go at whatever speed is appropriate so you can understand the material well. I'm not going to quiz you on this, but I do want you to read normally. And I will hide my webcam during this 1 minute of reading. So goodbye. That webcam should disappear right now, and you should have maybe a larger screen. Hopefully you're ready to read because I'm going to pull up the article, or maybe you have an article pulled up, and we're just going to read for 1 minute. Here's the article. Go ahead and begin reading now. All right, that is a minute of reading. Go ahead and stop. Take a look at the line where you stopped, and let's figure out what your speed was. Now, the way you're going to do that, you see all those numbers on the side, right? On the right-hand side of the column, this is page 1, of course. Page 2 is on the right. I want you to look at the line where you stopped, and that tells you how many words are from the very beginning to the end of that line. So if you stopped reading after this second paragraph here, that's 170. Maybe you got down to here, that would be 222. And of course, you could be precise. If you stopped somewhere in the middle, you can just add or subtract from the previous number or that number to figure out what your speed was. Write that number off to the side. And this is just one measurement in this particular article. Of course, if you were reading something more technical, you'd probably have to go maybe a little bit slower, right? Because it's technical material. If you were reading something easier, I'm sure you would go faster. Your reading speed is more like a range, right? Like sometimes we're going faster because it's easy. Sometimes you got to slow it down. So whatever your range is, we want to move that range higher. And if you're wondering what the average is, the average reading speed is 150 to 250. That's where most people tend to fall. However, I want you to be aware that this is like a general average for adults. It doesn't take into account like young children. It also doesn't take into account education level. So if you're wondering for like college educated adults, because we do this a lot with universities from community colleges to like Ivy League schools. We've done this at Harvard, Columbia University in New York. And the average for college educated adults is a little bit higher. It's 200 to 300 for college educated. But I just want you to be aware of these averages because a lot of people aren't necessarily aware of what their reading speed is. When I was in high school, I used to take a lot of these keyboarding or typing classes, and you knew what your like typing speed was, and you try to beat it. You know what? There's this famous quote, what gets measured gets managed. And that's the idea. If you just know your numbers, you can try to improve upon them. Just like if I step on a scale in the morning, I usually make better decisions with food later on in the day because I remember what my weight was and I start thinking, wait a minute, I should eat better than I normally do. But knowing numbers helps you to improve them. So wherever you're at, let's work on improving. Also, when people read on the screen, they tend to read slower. Around 136 words a minute is the average on the screen. Maybe we're not reading on screens like this anymore, but there's more distractions when you're reading on the screen, right? Pop-ups, all sorts of things, ads. Now, this habit of subvocalization, I want you to know the reason why we got to change it is because if you're saying every word in your head, that means you're going to read as fast as you talk. And that's a problem because you can only talk so fast, right? Actually, you can measure your talking speed later if you want. You can do the same thing we just did. Read for 1 minute from the beginning, see how far you get, but read out loud. And you'll find most people, guess what the average reading speed is? We know that, right? 150 to 250, 200, 300. The average talking speed is actually 150 to 250. Now, some people talk faster than others, of course, and you can even talk at various speeds. I could try to talk really fast, or I can slow it down and go at a more concentrated pace. But the average is somewhere between here, and you would see the same thing. You could try this out later on. I'm not going to have you read out loud right now because it might be weird depending on your current setting, reading out loud. Like if you were in a library or in a cafe, this would be a little odd to just be reading out loud. It's a good thing that they tell us to, hey, don't read out loud anymore, say the words in your head. But what is faster, your talking speed or your thinking speed? You can think much faster than you can talk. Actually, there's a reason why our tagline here at Iris Reading is specifically this, as you see up there, reading at the speed of thought. For that reason, you can think much faster than this. And this is why we got to change this habit. It really limits people from getting faster. Now, first things first, the easiest thing that everybody learns when they're learning speed reading is, okay, if you're reading on the page, like printed material, you want to use something to guide your eyes, like your hand or pen. And it's because it helps you with concentration. You see this guy right here, he looks like he's spacing out. I've certainly spaced out while reading. You ever have that where you just start staring at a paragraph? You just gotta like snap out of it. That happens, especially if the material is dry. But one trick, if you want to think of it that way, or you can think of it also as a strategy, use something to guide your eyes and just moving your finger along the line. It's kind of like giving yourself a little nudge, or even your hand. It could even be a pen or a pencil to just smoothly go across. It's because our eyes are attracted to motion. However, it's not always convenient to use your hand as a guide. What if I'm reading off my phone or off of a screen? It's a different approach we might take. Actually, we've showcased this in our classes before, the way you might go about reading faster on the screen. Well, let's take some sample reading material right now from The Onion. If you're not familiar with The Onion, you're in for a treat here. This is, of course, America's finest news source. And we're going to read this article right here. NASA says presence of diving board on Mars confirms planet may have once contained water. Okay, so we're going to read this. As you can see, it's not a very long article, but I want to show you how you can read it faster using a program called Accelerator. And this is a free speed reading tool that we created. All you do is you copy and paste your text in here. Boom. Hit begin. And then set your speed to whatever you want in the settings. I've got it at 250 right here, which is again around average, maybe a little above average for some people. But let's try going 250. Focus your attention in the middle. You're going to notice the words blinking on the screen. And I want you to try and keep up as best as you can. By the way, I do also notice we're doing a webinar, so depending on your internet connection and mine, if there are any hiccups along the way, this is going to be blinking at a constant pace. But if you notice it get jumpy or freeze for a moment, that's just maybe a blip in the internet connection on my end or your end or somewhere in between. But I promise you, when you use this on your own, it's going to blink pretty consistently. My internet connection is pretty good here, so we should be fine. Focus your attention here. We're going to read this silly article right here. Let's try it out. Here we go. All right, so you see that going at 250. So 250 words per minute. If you're able to keep up with that, that's faster than what most people would do on the screen. Remember, I said the average reading speed on the screen, that's closer to 136. But if we're going with this program, you may have noticed when we were using it, did you notice it was blinking 3 words at a time? That's something you could change in the settings. And I recommend doing a chunk size. You see right there, the chunk size should be 2, 3 at a minimum. But I mean, you could do 1, but we want to learn to read groups of words. So you could use this to train yourself to read 2, 3, 4 words. And let's try bumping up our speed, because I think a lot of us can go faster if we just push ourselves. So let's take a new article here. Neighborhood's starting to get too safe for family to afford. Not sure if you guys have been to Chicago, but there are some homes that look like this in Chicago. Look at that. It's actually a Chicago-based article. It's a very short article, but we're going to read this. Neighborhood's starting to get too safe for family to afford. Copy paste, go to begin. We're going to upgrade the speed from 250 to 300. Now you can do that with keyboard shortcuts. There are some shortcuts at the bottom you see. You can use the up and down arrow keys to change your speed by 25. Also pretty helpful is the space bar if you want to pause it or play. If you want to go back, use the back arrow to go back. Let's try going 300 words a minute. I'm going to press the up arrow key once and twice. Now you see the speed has changed. Let's try reading this article at 300 words a minute. Here we go. All right, so now that was 300 words a minute. Let's play around with the program, make some modifications. And I see Nick has a question here. What words per minute increment increase do you recommend? Also, how long should we practice, a day or a week? We'll get into that in a few moments. But as far as the increment I recommend, first, I think you should test out your speed where you feel like, okay, comprehension was pretty decent. So at first, you might set it at something too high or too low. But then wherever it's at, where your comfort level is, I think then what you try to do is, and actually I have a slide for it here, is you try to go based on this question of, can you read 20% faster? Now, it doesn't have to be exactly 20%, but it's like giving yourself a little nudge. So to me, I might say, okay, let's say you were comfortable at 300. And it doesn't have to be exactly 20% faster. What if you bump this up to 350? I mean, that's not exactly 20% faster, but I mean, close to it. 20% faster would be like 360. So actually, let's try that. We'll bump it up to 360. Let's take some new article though. Let's take another Chicago one here. Okay, snowstorm in Chicago delays hundreds of morning murders. So we're going to read this one. And here's the thing. And a good question here from Jonathan. So instead of subvocalizing, should we be thinking about reading? You're going to be seeing words without saying them eventually. I mean, you'll say some of them. The thing about this habit of subvocalization, I want to add it because there's some nuance here, because other programs that teach about speed reading don't always do it. Subvocalization is not a habit you will get rid of completely, ever. It's not about eliminating it. It's about reducing it. So here's the nuance. When I read, I still say words in my head, but I don't say each and every single word. In my head, when I'm reading, I'll say some of the words, but not all of them. So if I had a sentence like, the boy jumped over the fence, in my head, I might just say, boy jumped fence. I still see all the other words. I'm just not saying them. Similar thing happens to when you're driving and you see a stop sign, or if you're taking a road trip to New York City and you see New York City. You see the exit sign on the highway, but you don't necessarily say New York City. You don't say those words in your head. You just see it and you got it. But going back to Nick's question, what increment should we go for? Find out where your comfort level is, and then try to do this little this idea of going 20% faster. And the idea behind that is the way we get better at things is by getting out of our comfort zone. So we find out where the comfort zone is first, and then we try to nudge ourselves. Just like if you had a trainer, they would be like, "Hey, just a few more reps," right? Or if you had a coach, I used to play basketball ever since I was 5. Played a little bit of college basketball too. And when you have a coach, they are running you like crazy. And normally, if you were running sprints on your own, at a certain point, you're going to tap out, right? But if you have a coach, they're going to try to squeeze that little bit extra out of you. So how do we squeeze a little bit of improvement? Well, let's try going a little bit faster. So last time we had 300 words a minute. We're going to go now to 360. And we're going to read this article. Snowstorm in Chicago delays hundreds of morning murders. Okay. And even if this is too fast, just try your best to keep up. No worries if you don't have the best of comprehension. Some of you might find that you still have decent comprehension because you're going faster, and that forces you to focus. Let's try it out. We got it at 360. Here we go. Now you see how that was a little bit faster. The concept here that's important, and again, 20% is a generalization. It just means like giving yourself a little nudge, consciously going a little bit faster. If I was reading in a book, the same thing would apply. I know what I'm comfortable at, and I'm going at a certain speed, but now I'm going to read, but I'm going to consciously go just slightly faster than usual. Maybe you move your hand a little faster or your pen a little bit faster. And the thing about that is when you go a little faster, sometimes that can trick your mind into paying more attention. So if I'm better focused, I might even have better comprehension. Think about when you're driving and you're getting onto the highway. What happens? You start speeding up, right? But what happens as you speed up? Don't you start paying more attention? Like I'm looking in my rearview mirror, my side mirrors, checking over my shoulder at the blind spot. All of a sudden, I'm more focused because I'm going a bit faster, right? So that's what we're trying to achieve here with that kind of an exercise. Find my comfort level and then try to nudge it up a little more. Now, another approach you can take is based on this idea. Well, how do you get better at anything? Practice. And Nick had a good question about how long should we practice, a day or a week. I'm going to get to that, but I want to show you how you might practice using what we call speed drills. So when we're talking about practice as it relates to reading, the speed drills can help you bump up your speed bit by bit. And the way they work is not by going just a little bit faster, 20%, but by going a lot faster. So think of it like running a sprint. Reading would be the equivalent of jogging. I'm not walking and I'm not running. I'm jogging, going at a speed where it's not too fast, not too slow. But when you're doing speed drills, that's like going at a much faster rate. It's like running or sprinting. What we're going to do is you take material you've already read. Let's take we got this article right here. Remember this one? You take material you already read and you go at double your normal reading speed. So what does that mean? You read this, remember at the beginning of this webinar, you read for 1 minute to a certain line, right? I want you to get to that same line from the beginning in 30 seconds. So what you're going to do is you're going to actively go at a speed that's double your normal speed, right? Starting from the beginning. It's kind of like skimming because you're just going to reread what you've already read. The whole point is not about rereading. The point is to get used to seeing the words at a very rapid pace. How much faster? Like twice as fast. So let's try that out as just like a sample drill. I want you to start at the beginning where we started earlier. You read for a minute up to a certain point, wherever that might be. You got to get to that same spot or further in 30 seconds. Okay, let's try it out. And if you had this printed out, or if you don't mind touching your screen, you could do that. But if not, just use your eyes to go faster and just skim through everything you read. Start from the beginning. I'm giving you 30 seconds to read through or skim through the minute of reading you did. You only got 30 seconds to get there. Ready, set, and go. All right, that was 30 seconds. Did you make it to your line? Now, that was just a quick drill. Another version of this might be I read for 10 minutes, okay? I got to a certain point. Maybe I read from phone there. Maybe I read from the beginning of chapter 5 all the way to the end or to halfway through, and I did 10 minutes of reading. Now I'm going to go back to the beginning of the chapter, and I'm going to reread or skim everything that I read in half the time. So if I read 10 minutes from the beginning to, I don't know, somewhere over here, I got to go back from the beginning to that same line or page in half the time. So if you read for 20 minutes, you're doing a 5-minute drill. If you read for 10 minutes, you're doing a 5-minute drill. What if you read a short little article? It might be 4 minutes of reading and then you do a 2-minute drill. That is just to get used to seeing the words. You could even use that accelerator program. Let me show you how. We read, remember this article at the beginning? NASA says presence of diving board on Mars confirms planet may have once contained water. Well, we read that at 250 words a minute. Let's try going 500. Watch, I'm bumping it up to 500. We're going to see what that looks like right now. You already read this at 250. Now let's see the words and do a speed drill at 500. Here we go. Okay, so that was 500 words a minute. And all we're doing is material we already read, and we're training our eyes to see the words at double the normal speed. Now, if you had another article and you were reading it at 300, you just bump it up to something like 600. By the way, I should apologize. It looks like we're going to go like 5 minutes over on the time. I know we said for a quick 30 minutes, but it looks like we might go a little over on the time. I hope you guys don't mind. Part of that is also you guys are sending questions, and I love getting questions because I'm happy to answer them. But here's the thing, after you do a number of speed drills over and over again, eventually you reset and you go back to what would be considered normal reading. And then you say to yourself, okay, now that I got used to seeing these words at double my normal speed, let me go back to normal reading. I take maybe another chapter or another passage, and now I'm going to go at whatever speed is comfortable, not too fast, not too slow. Maybe you're using your hand or finger or pen as a guide. And we're just going to read right now for a minute. And like I said, go at a speed that's comfortable enough to understand what you're reading. And you can just read from this article I have on the screen here. Okay, let's try it out. I'm giving you a minute of reading now. Ready, set, and go. All right, so that was a minute of reading. Take a look at the line that you stopped, where you stopped, and figure out what your speed was based on that minute. Now, we didn't really do many drills here, but if you did a long extended set of drills, like let's say 10 minutes of drills, you might find yourself reading a bit faster. And actually, I'm curious, so you could let me know in the chat if you read faster this time around versus the first time around. I'd be curious to know. Sometimes people get a little bit of an improvement just from a few drills. So a few questions I see in the chat. One from Ramesh, he mentions that, but won't chunking the words on actual paper be harder compared to that accelerator program that blinks the words? The way you would handle it on paper is, you know how you're using your hand or your finger or pen as a guide? What you can do is you can imagine the line was cut into 3 or 4 parts, depending on the width of the line. And what you're doing is you're going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Or if the margins were even wide, like very wide, I might go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's kind of like you're tapping on the line, or you're making 3 fixations per line or 4 fixations per line. What if the line was very narrow? Well, then I'm just going to go 2 fixations, 1, 2, 1, 2. If it's extremely narrow, like think of like old school newspapers, like you pick up a Wall Street Journal, you'll see the columns have like 2 or 3 words per line, maybe 4 if the words are small. Those are lines where you might just go down the middle, okay? But you can train yourself to read groups of words. And here's the thing. If you made an improvement, awesome. That's why a lot of times I'll show this slide over here. This kid's been an internet sensation for a few years now, this internet meme. And there are these drills, the way they work, it's kind of like being on the highway. When you're on the highway, you're going faster than usual, all right? And when you get off the highway, how does it feel? It feels kind of slow, right? Why? Because you got used to going fast. So the way you could do these drills on your own, or if you want guided exercises, just to give you a heads up, you could take guided exercises through our website, or you could do some of these drills on your own. There's other exercises as well, but here's the way the drills work. It's like I said, being on the highway. You get used to going 70 miles an hour, you get off, now 40 feels slow. And these drills, the way they're practiced is, okay, 1, read your material first. Step 2, do a speed drill. And that is simply skimming what you've read in half the time. So again, 2-step process here. Read your material first. Could be a chapter in your book, a short news article, and then you read your material. After you read your material, you skim. You do a speed drill, which is going double your normal speed. Remember, we want to go twice as fast. So this kind of to answer Nick's question from earlier, how often? I would say 10 minutes a day for 2 weeks, and every so often remeasure your reading speed and keep consistent kind of material, and that can be helpful because then you can get a good measure of what your speed actually is. I also want to give you an idea of as to what we're going to be doing tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to go over memory, if you're interested in learning how to remember material better. But these speed drills, remember, you can practice them using Accelerator 2, the program that blinks the words on the screen. Also, we have a question from Larry about my retention is not where it needs to be. Yes, come to our webinar tomorrow. We're going to talk about memory and retention, and especially memorization. There's strategies for that. One other thing I want to mention is how these drills work to building up over time. So let's say you're an average reader going 200 words a minute. You practice at 400. So eventually you can get to 250. If you're already at 250, you practice at 500, double around 500. It doesn't have to be exact. So eventually you can get to 300. Now remember I said about the expressway or highway analogy. If you're going 70 miles an hour, when you get off the highway, 40 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour doesn't feel that fast if you got used to going 70. Similar to reading, when we're doing these drills, you're just skimming and seeing the words super fast at 700. Eventually you get off the highway, you go back to normal reading, and 400 becomes this speed that doesn't feel as fast as it used to. So that's how we can build up our speed over time. So that's why I recommend doing these kind of drills, or check out one of our courses just to give you a heads up. And also I want to offer you guys a little freebie. If you're interested in the topic of focus, and we'll do a webinar on it, we have a book that the author has given us permission to freely distribute. The book is Focus, a Simplicity Manifesto in the Age of Distraction. If you want me to shoot you a copy of it, it's a quick read, a lot of practical tips in there. I'll send you the PDF. Just shoot me an email, paul@irisreading.com, and I can send that over to you. For those of you that have stuck around to the end here, I also want to give you a heads up into like a little sneak peek on Monday, which is popularly known as Cyber Monday. We are doing a sale for all our online courses. So if you go to our website, by the way, we have online courses that are on sale. They're all going to be 40 bucks on Monday. Well, actually, we just updated the site right now. If you want to check out any of those, we have courses related to obviously speed reading, memory. We even have productivity courses, note taking. We have a very popular course, Boosting Productivity with ChatGPT, how to remember names. You can go here, a mind mapping course if you're interested in that form of note taking. So you just go to the website, irisreading.com. You can check it out there. Or if you want to check out some of the live classes that we're doing around the US, you can click on Take a Live Class, search for your city, and you can see if we have any classes scheduled near you. And there's also, sometimes people want to do one-on-one sessions. So you could also book a one-on-one if you want to work on any of these skills. But I just wanted you guys to be aware of that because a lot of people ask, what other courses do you guys have? If there are questions, stick around. I do see some questions that I'm going to stick around to answer here. And I appreciate you guys going a little longer. Sorry, we were shooting for 30 minutes, but we went over on the time. Here's my contact info, by the way. If you have questions in the future, shoot me an email, paul@irisreading.com. Also, if you want me to send you that copy, same email. Just mentioned you were in the webinar today. I'm happy to send that PDF book to you on the topic of focus. And feel free to follow us on any of these social networks where you might be active. I do see some questions, but for a moment, I'm just going to pause to grab a sip of water. Give me like 20 seconds, and then I'll review some of the questions we have here and try to get to as many of them as we can. But otherwise, thank you all so much for joining us. You'll also get an email about tomorrow's webinar on memory. I hope you find it very, very helpful. Jonathan asks, is the online course bundle similar to material what's covered in the live course? Yes. So our live course, when we do a live, like in-person course, it's a 4-hour program. And actually, in a lot of ways, the online courses cover more sometimes than the 4-hour training. But people that take our 4-hour training programs, we also give them access to the online courses. So if you have any questions about that, shoot me an email. But yes, it is very similar. All right. If you want to get that focus book, I see a question, shoot me an email. Send me an email, paul@irisreading.com. Just let me know you're in the webinar and you want me to send you that PDF, and I will send that over to you. All right, give me 1 second. Anyway, thank you all so much for joining us. Hope you join us on some of the other webinars. The next one tomorrow is memory. The one on Monday is going to be focus. And thank you all so much for the time. And have a great rest of the weekend. If you like what we're doing at Iris, please tell your friends about us. Tell all your friends about us. But if you don't like what we're doing, you got to tell your enemies about us because that'll show them. But thank you all so much. Have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you in the next one. And stick around if you want to be part of the Q&A.